Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional people of this area, the Wurundjeri people, and certainly give thanks to them because they're the ones that have cared for this land for thousands and thousands of years, so that you and I can certainly receive the benefits we receive today. Yesterday I started to think about what I'd actually do this morning when to talk about spirituality, and I sort of woke up to myself and thought how unreal it was going to be to try and even give you a little glimpse of what it is that makes my Aboriginal spirituality as such in 20 minutes, tucked away in a hall or in a room like this, when we're so far away from the country from which I come from. And my place is Lake Mungo, which is southwestern New South Wales. So I'm not really sure what you expect from me in 20 minutes to understand my spirituality. So I guess the best way that I can possibly do that is by sharing with you a little bit of who I am and the things that are important to me. And I guess they're the things that my old people had taught me. I was born on Wurundjeri land. I've continued to live on Wurundjeri land, but this will never be my home. Home, as I said, is Lake Mungo. That is my dreaming. It is the past, the present, and my future. I know, and I'll always know, that one day I will return back to Lake Mungo. I had the privilege of growing up knowing my country, and sadly there are thousands of Aboriginal people that don't know their true homeland. I was also privileged to have a mother who would take me back to my country every school holiday and every public holiday. My mum was a working mum here in Melbourne. She worked for 35 years in one shoe factory known as Footrest Shoes. And in all the time of living in this country, she made sure I knew my place of belonging, where my spirit laid and belonged. When we would go back home, and it was to a little country town called Balranald, when we would go back home, I would have the privilege once again of learning from my grandfather and my grandmother. My pop was a blind man, but my grandmother was a very, and still is, a very strong, radical Aboriginal woman. In her fight, it was always the fight for the heritage of the land, the protection of sacred sites, and the understanding of the sacred sites which she gave us.
I am a mati, an Angota tribal one. I am a mati. Benarandle is my home. I was born under the gum tree, on the banks of the Murrumbidgee, the place we call the depot. It is home, sweet home to me. I am a mati, an Angota tribal one. I am a mati, Benarandle is my home. Now I'm getting old and tired. When the twilight shadows fall, I'll sleep with my ancestors when the good Lord calls me home. I am a mati, an Angota tribal one. I am a mati, Benarandle is my home. I am a mati, Benarandle is my home.
As kids, we would walk out in the country. We would be the eyes of my grandfather. Because he was blind, he asked us to describe what we would see. And he was able to tell us then our relationship to the land, to the animals, to the stars, everything that had been created. So through his blindness, we soon became the learners and the strong people or strong children of knowing our heritage. Then there would be the times of when we would actually spend the time on the river. And that time they taught me about the patience of being in one with the land, with the birds, and of course with the riverways. I consider myself to be a woman from the river country. The patience I learnt was certainly how to catch a fish. If you ever tried to catch a Murray cod on the Murrumbidgee, it's not very possible, or not too easy these days, and especially back then. Yellow belly was the main catch, and of course the brim as well. So I learnt by walking in the footsteps of my old people. Then we would have the wonderful times of sleeping with Nan and Pop. All of us kids would be at the foot of their bed. Nan and Pop had this amazing bed. It was an old wrought iron thing. So at the end of the bed, during the night, we'd get the stories, the great debates from Nan and Pop. And the great debate that we had was the stories of ceremonies, the language, the loss of language. They would talk in language. Even though my grandfather was a Wamba Wamba man, they could still relate to each other. And they'd tell us about the old people, about the sacredness of the ceremonies. They would tell us about the sacredness of the country. They would tell us about the sacredness of the symbols, and of course, very much in those rituals. And as they talked and talked and talked and debated many times, my grandfather was also a man, very strong, I would call us very strong, tall warrior. He would be visited by the men from a place called Anamuka, very, very traditional men, and it is there where I was taught about men's and women's business. You see, we were never allowed to look. We were never allowed to go near the men when they would gather around the back of the old house. So I learnt that respect of culture and respect of ceremony. Then, in the great debate that Nan and Pop would have of a night time, the conversation would shift. It would shift to the stories of the Old Testament. You see, I get my Catholic faith as well from my grandparents. The shift would turn to the Old Testament, where they would be making comparison to the traditions of my old people and the traditions of the people in the Bible. They discussed very similar ceremonies, tribes, language groups, rituals. But the amazing thing that always came up in the great conversation was that we as Aboriginal people are equal in the whole of creation. That was the law that they taught me. The law that we are not superior. You see, the Creator created us as part of creation. We had to coexist with everything that had been created. You see, if we were superior, we would not need the stars to guide us. We would not need the animals to feed us, the water to sustain us, and the land for our spiritual base. You see, when you talk about the land, it's a place where I come from. You know, my country, Lake Mungo, has given proof that Aboriginal people have been in this land for thousands and thousands of years. And of course, scientists today has proven that as well. Science has proved, or given the fact and the truth that people need, or the evidence I call it, the evidence of the oral stories told by my old people. We are not people from another country, we are people from this land. So in that ultimate law, that law of being equal in the whole of creation, it was also the law that this country has given birth to us. We belong to it. We are a part of it. You cannot take it away from us. We have at least 40,000 years of belonging to this country. It's in my blood. It's in my spirit. And then the conversation of a night time would also shift to the New Testament. And that's where my old people, my grandparents, found hope. They found hope and liberation for justice. The justice that they were seeking to be rightful Aboriginal people in this country, to be the people they once were, the people of language, art, and sacred ceremony. And with the New Testament came about not only hope and liberation, but a new friendship. A friendship with a person that I'd never witnessed before in non-Aboriginal people. So then today, what is it? I don't know why I'm shaking, but I am. I guess it's a lot of my insides of who I am, and it's not easy to spill it out and share it like this in such a large group. So what is it today that sustains me in the position that I have, not only in my home, in my community, but also in my family? And I often search and reflect a lot on what is it that keeps me going spiritually on Wurundjeri land that isn't mine. And I guess it's the going back to my country, doing the things that my mother did for me, by taking my daughter back, taking her back so that she has a place of belonging too. You see, today I survive not only in the belonging, but it's the knowing. It's the knowing that I have a place to take my daughter back, and my grandchildren will have a place of identity too. You see, Lake Mungo is quite an amazing inheritance to have. It's an inheritance that I could never ever have here on Wurundjeri land, because it's far more than a building and a piece of property with some nice furniture. It is who I am. So the knowing gives me security, the knowing that there'll be a place for my daughter and her children, that identity that I hold every day. A lot of people pray every day. I just think about my country, the place where my old people once fished, danced, shared symbols and rituals. It's the knowing that it is still sacred today. And that's what keeps me strong in my Aboriginal spirituality. That's what keeps me strong as an Aboriginal woman today. Without that,